The chill of the Saint Petersburg winter had a way of seeping into your bones, a relentless cold that was both a constant companion and an uninvited guest. My first night as the caretaker of the Hermitage Museum was no exception. The grandeur of the museum, with its palatial architecture and centuries of history, did little to warm the air or ease the growing knot of apprehension in my stomach. As I stepped through the vast, ornate doors, the shift from the biting outdoor chill to the silent, imposing halls of the museum was jarring. The transition was not just a change in temperature, it was like stepping into another world, a world where time stood still, and the whispers of the past lingered in the air, caught in the opulent tapestries and the stoic faces of painted aristocrats. The job was straightforward, or so I thought. Walk the corridors, ensure the security of the exhibits, and maintain the sanctity of the museum. Yet, as I began my rounds, the stillness of the museum felt oppressive, a stark contrast to the bustling streets outside. The echoes of my footsteps were too loud in the vast, empty halls, a solitary sound in the encompassing silence. I tried to focus on the routine, the methodical checking of doors and windows, the soft glow of my flashlight, a small island of light in the overwhelming darkness. But as the night deepened, a sense of unease began to take root. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, an instinctual warning that something was amiss. The museum, with its endless corridors and shadowed corners, seemed to watch me, a silent observer. I paused in front of a grand painting, its subject's eyes following me, a silent accusation or perhaps a warning. The air felt colder here, the silence deeper. A shiver ran down my spine, not entirely from the cold. I reminded myself that it was just a painting, just a building, just a job. But as I turned to continue my rounds, a faint noise stopped me in my tracks. It was nothing more than a whisper of sound, like fabric brushing against fabric. I told myself it was just the museum settling, the creaks and groans of an old building. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being not quite alone. The rational part of my mind urged me to continue, to follow the logical path of my nightly rounds. But curiosity, that most human of traits, whispered seductively, urging me to investigate. The sound had seemed to come from nowhere, yet I felt drawn to the museum's depths, to the shadows that seemed to flicker just beyond the reach of my light. As I ventured deeper into the museum, the air grew stiller, the silence heavier. The sense of unease grew with each step, a silent crescendo in the symphony of dread that filled the cavernous spaces. It was then, in the oppressive silence of the Hermitage at night, that I realized my tenure as caretaker would be anything but ordinary. This was not merely a job, it was the beginning of an ordeal, a journey into the shadows of the past that would unravel the fabric of my reality. The Hermitage, with its endless corridors lined with the spoils of history, had always commanded a certain type of silence, a respectful hush reserved for places of great importance and solemnity. But that night, as I ventured deeper into the heart of the museum, the silence morphed into something more palpable, more oppressive. It was as if the very air had thickened, heavy with unspoken secrets and the weight of time. As I continued my rounds, the flashlight in my hand became less of an aid and more of a lifeline, a feeble barrier against the encroaching darkness. The deeper I ventured, the more the museum seemed to change. Walls that should have been familiar now loomed like strangers, and shadows twisted into grotesque shapes at the edges of my vision. I tried to convince myself it was just the trick of the light, the fatigue of a long night, but a small, insistent part of my mind whispered of other darker possibilities. The sounds that had initially seemed so distant and indistinct now grew in clarity and strength. They were no longer just the innocuous creaks and groans of an old building. They had rhythm, a strange sort of cadence that seemed almost intentional. Scratching sounds, soft whispers, the faint rustling of movement. It was as if the museum itself was communicating, using a language born from the bowels of history. I found myself drawn towards the source of these sounds, as if pulled by a current beyond my control. Each step felt heavier, more deliberate, as if I was not just walking through a museum, but through the layers of time itself. The air grew colder, the atmosphere denser. I could feel the weight of countless eyes upon me, though I knew the halls were empty, or so I believed. The path led me inexorably to the museum's underbelly, the basement, a place seldom frequented by staff or visitors. It was a part of the Hermitage shrouded in mystery, home to artifacts not displayed to the public, items too fragile, too precious, or perhaps too dangerous to withstand the scrutiny of the outside world. As I descended the narrow staircase, the air grew chillier, the whispers louder. There was a presence here, something ancient and watchful. The basement was not just a storage space, it was a sanctum, a repository of the past where the line between the material and the mystical blurred. The sounds guided me through the labyrinthine cellar, past shelves laden with unnamed relics, and through dimly lit corridors lined with covered statues and sealed crates. The sense of something otherworldly grew with every step, a feeling of encroaching dread that I could neither explain nor escape. And then, I saw them, the cats of the Hermitage, known residents of the museum, regarded by many as its unofficial guardians. But these were not the aloof, indifferent creatures I had seen by daylight, basking in the admiration of visitors. These cats watched me with eyes that glowed unnaturally in the dark, their bodies tense, coiled like springs. They were no longer mere animals. They were something else, something altered. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that the sounds I had been following, the whispers, the scratches, were emanating from these very creatures. They were communicating, not with each other, but with the very essence of the museum itself, or so it seemed in the madness of the moment. Fear and fascination warred within me as I stood frozen, watching the transformed cats. What were they? Guardians of some ancient secret, or harbingers of something far more sinister? I should have turned back, should have fled the oppressive darkness and the malevolent stares of the feline watchers. But I couldn't. The mystery of the Hermitage had ensnared me, its secrets beckoning with unseen fingers, drawing me deeper into the shadows of a past that was not meant to be unearthed. In the bowels of the Hermitage, surrounded by the unnerving gaze of the transformed cats, I felt an ancient energy pulsating through the stone foundations. It was as if the museum itself had awakened, its walls breathing with a life unseen but deeply felt. The air was thick, charged with a power that seemed to ebb and flow like the tide, resonating with the whispers that had guided me here. The cats, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, formed a semicircle around me. There was an intelligence in their gaze, a purpose, and a knowing that went beyond animal instinct. They were not just animals. They were the custodians of this place, imbued with a duty that had spanned centuries. The realization sent a shiver down my spine, intertwining with the cold that seeped from the stone floors into my bones. I tried to move, to break the invisible chains that seemed to hold me in place, but my body refused to obey. It was as if the very air around me had thickened, becoming a viscous sea in which I was ensnared. The cats remained motionless, their eyes fixed on me, as if waiting for something, some unseen signal or event. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to speak in a language forgotten by time. They filled the basement, echoing off the ancient walls, weaving around me in an auditory tapestry that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. In that moment, I understood that these sounds were not random. They were a communication, a message being relayed through the ages, meant for those who stood guard over the museum's secrets. The atmosphere in the basement shifted, a palpable change in the very fabric of the space that I could feel but not see. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, forming patterns and symbols on the walls that flickered like ghostly flames. The cats watched these manifestations with rapt attention, their bodies tense, as if they too were deciphering the shadowy language. It dawned on me then that the Hermitage was more than a repository of art and history. It was a sanctum, a keeper of truth so profound and ancient that they were guarded not by locks and keys, but by creatures bound to the museum's soul, the cats, These silent sentinels were the link between the physical world and the ethereal secrets ensconced within these walls. The air quivered with a silent command, and the cats responded. They moved in unison, slow and deliberate, leading me deeper into the labyrinth of the basement. Each step took me further from the world I knew, deeper into a realm where history, myth, and reality were indistinguishable. The walls seemed to whisper secrets in a language that tugged at the edges of my understanding, a siren song that promised answers yet concealed unimaginable truths. As we ventured further, the temperature dropped. The cold, a physical presence that wrapped around me like a shroud. I could see my breath in the air, each exhalation a ghostly apparition in the beam of my faltering flashlight. The cats remained unaffected by the chill, their eyes fixed forward, leading me to an unknown destination deep within the heart of the Hermitage. What began as a routine night had spiraled into a journey beyond the realms of the known, a trek through the shadows of time guarded by creatures that defied logical explanation. The distinction between guardian and guide blurred as the cats led me deeper into the darkness, into the heart of the museum's ancient, slumbering secrets. The sense of dread that had been my constant companion now mixed with a profound sense of awe, as I realized I was part of something far greater, far older than myself, a narrative woven from the very threads of history and mystery. The chill of the subterranean depths clung to my skin as I followed the silent feline procession deeper into the Hermitage's heart. The cats, those enigmatic guides, moved with purpose through the twisting corridors, their steps silent, their intent inscrutable. The flashlight in my hand flickered, a feeble protest against the overwhelming darkness that seemed to drink in the light, leaving only the faintest illumination to guide our path. As we ventured further, the very structure of the museum began to warp around me. Corridors that I remembered from my daytime rounds twisted into unfamiliar pathways, the architecture morphing into a maze of impossible geometry. It was as though the museum itself was alive, its layout a shifting, changing entity that responded to my presence with a malevolent intelligence. The air grew thick with a sense of foreboding, each breath a laborious effort against an unseen pressure. The walls whispered with the voices of the past, their words unintelligible yet filled with an urgency that quickened my heartbeat. The shifting shadows played tricks on my eyes, creating visions of looming figures and twisted faces that vanished when looked upon directly. I realized then that I was no longer merely a visitor in a museum. I had become a pawn in a game whose rules were written in the cryptic language of the ancient and the arcane. The Hermitage had revealed itself to be a living, breathing entity, a keeper of secrets that were not meant for mortal eyes. The cats led me through this ever-changing labyrinth with unfaltering certainty, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness like beacons. Despite their silent company, a profound sense of isolation enveloped me, a realization that I was utterly alone in a reality that had shifted beyond my understanding. The familiar sense of time and place had unraveled, leaving me adrift in a sea of history and mystery. With each turn, the sense of dread within me grew, a tangible weight that threatened to crush my resolve. I knew I needed to escape, to find my way back to the world I knew. But the museum had other plans. It seemed to sense my growing desperation, the maze becoming more convoluted, the air denser, the whispers louder. The temperature dropped further, the cold seeping into my bones, a constant reminder of the unnatural forces at play. My breath formed thick clouds in the air, a visible testament to the descent into the unknown. The cats, unaffected by the chill, continued their silent march, their determination unyielding. In this surreal nightmare, the boundaries between the past and the present, the real and the unreal, began to blur. Statues seemed to watch me with stony eyes, their expressions flickering between indifference and malice. Paintings whispered secrets of their subjects, the lines between art and life blurring as the figures seemed to step out of their frames, their stories intertwining with the fabric of the museum. I stumbled through the darkness, guided by the cats yet lost in a world that no longer made sense. The museum had become a paradox, a place where history lived and breathed, where art transcended its physical boundaries to become something altogether more terrifying. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The Hermitage was not merely a building. It was a gateway, a bridge between worlds, guarded by creatures that were neither cat nor spirit, but something in between. And I, in my folly, had stepped through that gateway, into a realm where the walls between the past and the present, the real and the surreal, were perilously thin. As I followed the cats, the hope of escape became a distant dream, replaced by the overwhelming reality of my situation. I was lost in the heart of a living history, a pawn in a game played out across the ages, my path forward shrouded in shadow and mystery. The labyrinthine escape had become more than a physical journey. It was a descent into the depths of the unknown, a test of wills against the ancient silent guardians of the Hermitage. In the heart of the labyrinth, where the cold seeped into the very marrow of my bones, the cats finally halted. We stood in a chamber so vast that my flashlight seemed to shrink away from the overwhelming darkness, its beam a feeble protest against the engulfing shadows. Here, the whispers were no longer whispers but a chorus of voices, a cacophony of eras and epochs that echoed off the unseen walls. The cats, my enigmatic guides, turned to face me, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light that provided the only illumination in the suffocating blackness. In their silent vigil, they conveyed a message that transcended language, a command that resonated with the very core of my being. I was to wait, to listen, to understand. The air around me began to shimmer, the darkness undulating like the surface of a troubled sea. I watched, transfixed, as shapes began to form in the void, scenes from the past playing out in ghostly silhouettes against the dark canvas of the chamber. Wars, revolutions, periods of enlightenment, and eras of darkness unfolded before my eyes, each moment a thread in the intricate tapestry of human history. I realized then that the Hermitage was not merely a museum. It was a repository of humanity's collective memory, a guardian of the past that had been entrusted to the silent vigil of the cats. In this sacred chamber, the boundary between time and eternity blurred, and I stood at the confluence of countless lives and stories. The weight of this revelation pressed down on me, a burden that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. I was witnessing the unvarnished truth of existence, the beauty and horror of history laid bare. The cats watched me with ancient eyes, their silent gaze an admonition and an invitation to bear witness to the truths that lay hidden in the depths of time. As the visions faded, the darkness grew deeper, more absolute. I felt myself slipping, losing my foothold in the tangible world. The cold was no longer an external force, but something that emanated from within, a chilling realization of my own insignificance in the grand tapestry of time. The cats, once the guides through the twisting corridors of the Hermitage, now stood as sentinels at the threshold between worlds. They had led me to this place of revelation, not as a punishment, but as a final act of guardianship, to show me the truths hidden beneath the surface of the museum's calm exterior. In that moment of clarity, I understood the true nature of the Hermitage. It was not a prison, nor was it a mere building filled with artifacts. It was a bridge between the mortal and the eternal, a place where the past and present coexisted in silent communion. But with this understanding came a profound isolation. The knowledge I had gained was not meant for the world of the living. I had become a part of the museum's fabric, another shadow in its vast corridors, another whisper in its echoing halls. The cats, their role fulfilled, faded into the darkness, leaving me alone in the silent chamber. I was no longer afraid, for I had transcended fear. I had become a part of something greater, a silent guardian of the threshold between past and present. In the end, the darkness consumed me, not with malice, but with the gentle finality of a story reaching its conclusion. My existence, my identity was erased, leaving no trace in the world of the living. But in the heart of the Hermitage, among the silent echoes of history, I found a new purpose. As the darkness enveloped me, I understood that I was not disappearing. I was merging with the infinite tapestry of human experience, becoming a part of the museum's eternal vigil. My physical form was gone, but my essence remained, woven into the very fabric of the Hermitage, a silent witness to the endless dance of history. And so, I became another of the museum's secrets, a silent, unseen guardian watching over the silent corridors, forever a part of the Hermitage's dark, whispered legacy.